Imagine Vampire Survivor, but it has Diablo 2 aesthetic and a higher skill curve. That is Halls of Torment. Your screen is constantly filled with enemies, their projectiles, and your projectiles, because why the hell not? And while all that is happening, your reward circuit is constantly being stimulated by the shiny coins. I have been addicted to this game for days, and this is a cry for help. Let's get started. Halls of Torment has next to no story. You start the game in an ominously empty room with a single character, the warrior. Select him and there is only one thing you can interact with, the big ass door behind you. Walk into it and you drop right into the first level of the game. From there, you must survive for 30 minutes and defeat the last boss of the stage to progress to the next one. Along the way, you will gather more characters with unique abilities to aid you in conquering the halls. Everything reminds me of the old Diablo games. From the color schemes of the stages to the character design and their effects, the game feels very dark and brutal. Each movement of the character is done with force and intention. It's so heavy, each attack is so meaty with awesome sound design. There is the dead grey first stage, the lava red second stage, the sickly green third stage, or the muted white at the fourth one. Each run is a journey into the land of the dead itself, with no sign of life. Everything in there is dead, and they want you dead as well. And I have to iterate again, the game has amazing sound design. Do you want to know what a pure dopamine rush sounds like? Just like Vampire Survivor, Halls of Torment starts very slow. You're just some dude with a pool noodle going against hordes and hordes of hellspawn. But Halls of Torment has a unique aspect to its gameplay. You can control the direction of your attack. With Vampire Survivor, your attack is pretty much automated. There are some attacks that are tied to the direction of your character, but the main focus is the movement. Halls of Torment gives you another dimension of gameplay. Now, not only do you have to keep an eye on your position, you have to choose where to strike so you can either open a path to outside of the mob horde or panic and get swarmed. This simple feature makes the game so much more engaging as you have to constantly juggle the two actions, and the warrior is the perfect starter character for this. He has average movement speed and slow attacks, so everything you do must be tactical to ensure the best reward, maximum damage dealt and minimum damage received. The first run of the game is incredibly intense as you can die very easily at all moments. But it's also very addicting in its own way. Where Vampire Survivor is almost entirely decided by chance, you either get a good roll or a bad roll. Halls of Torment makes itself clear that skill is what carries you, rolls for upgrades are just secondary. Halls of Torment is still being developed, but it already has a very good amount of enemy variety. Even in the first level, there are already 9 unique enemy types for you to fight. The game sort of eases you into its trap in the first 10 minutes with easy to clear mobs like skeletons and slimes, but the moment you make it past the second boss, the game will start throwing very tough mobs at you en masse. And it is entirely up to you to make it out of there alive in one piece or die and restart. The cool thing about the mobs in Halls of Torment is that they have varied speed and move patterns. The skeletons are slow and walk in a straight line directly to you, while the slimes spring sideways. The imps will rush you unless you turn around and look at them, which will make them back off. The spear skeleton which is outright trying to rush you down, and the hounds will walk towards you in a vortex form, creating an almost impenetrable wall of bad time if you don't know how to get out of there. These enemies keep you on the move at all times with their numbers and tactics, making the runs very intense. But that's only scratching the surface, as there are 3 more holes like this one with increasing enemy variety and difficulty. Yes, there are more of them, and yes, they are harder to kill, almost to a ridiculous degree sometimes. While we're talking about enemy variety, I cannot neglect the bosses. I can say that the bosses are absolute highlight of this game. In the first stage, your first boss is an oversized skeleton grunt with basic movements, so you're lulled into a false sense of security that the bosses in this game are easy. Then, out of nowhere, the Imp Chieftain jumps out and slams you with his hammer. This guy's fast, aggressive, and he summons more imps that will rush you. If you stay at range, he will jump on you. If you stay close to him, he will run you down. So the boss fight suddenly becomes this perfect dance of keeping just enough distance so that you can still hit him but not get hit. Oh, and you still have to deal with the trash mobs that are zoning in on you. After the chieftain has been defeated, you will face the skeleton boss with a shield. It's slow, but the moment you get rid of the shield, it will try to rush you down. But this boss is infinitely easier than the next boss, the Skeleton Lord. Just like the chieftain, the Skelly boss man has tools to hurt you both at melee and range. He has a straight fire line attack, a circular delayed attack, and a triangle cone for ranged characters. Plus, he summons the spear skeletons. You will get overwhelmed at first, but once you got the rhythm down, it's in the bag. The next boss though is definitely on the annoying side. Well, not very tanky. The wizard shoots 3 projectiles at you that deals a lot of damage, and the motherfucker teleports. Normally, it's not too bad, but when there's a sea of creatures wanting to tear you limb to limb, it's hard to get to him. The boss after the wizard is Uber Lilith if she's actually good. A lot of summons, telegraph projectiles, and dodgeable area of effect damage. Then, after you've survived a whole 30 minutes of onslaught, the Lord of Pain awaits. This boss is great, and I won't go into too much detail for a spoiler, but he's a skill check boss. The Lord of Pain is basically the combination of all the previous bosses, except he's much tougher, so you better use all the tricks you've learned before to deal with him. Overall, the enemy design of Halls of Torment is great. All of their attacks are clearly telegraphed, and nothing hits you off screen. Also, there's no crowd control in the game, so you can actually play it. And if you think to yourself, neat, what can I do with all these bosses? Probably be cool if there's a boss rush. Well, don't worry, there's a nice surprise waiting for you in the second stage. Halls of Torment has a very similar yet different progression system compared to Vampire Survivor. Whereas in Vampire Survivor, you get item and item levels with each level up, in Halls of Torment you get traits and skills. All of your characters have a main weapon and they only use that. As they level up, they get traits, which is basically stat bonuses like movement and attack speed, health regen, and so on. The skills act like extra weapons, and if they can be aimed, they are tied to the main weapon, while the gears provide stat bonuses and special effects. Sometimes. Now, truth be told, I somewhat prefer this system of progression rather than the Vampire Survivor system. Now, don't get me wrong, the hype of chest opening is awesome. And if you have a lucky roll, the game will just play itself. But engaging combat is just so much more fun to me, especially when the stat upgrades improves the game in a very subtle yet substantial way. The gears are quite interesting, particularly the way you acquire them. Gears only drop from some bosses, the even number bosses to be exact, and they need to be brought to the Wellkeeper, which you have to rescue in the second stage. From there, you can only extract 1 items per run through the well, so you have to gamble on whether or not you're gonna die before you get it, or you're gonna get a better item. It adds a lot of tension to the already stressful run. And that's not all of it. They cost out the ass at the Wellkeeper's shop, which means you have to grind even more gold. But the nice thing is, once you purchase that item, it's yours forever, which you can equip it on all of your characters anytime you want. And some pieces of equipment have insane synergies with some character, which changes the way you play the game significantly. There is a pair of boots that leaves behind a trail of fire. It is amazing on the Terminator, but for it to work you have to be constantly on the move. This puts you in a high risk, high reward situation. The more you move, the more you do damage, but you can also walk yourself into an awful trap and have to fight your way out, most often time with half of your health bar remaining. Halls of Torment is an awesome game that is still being developed, and it's so cheap on Steam. If you have a few hours on your hand, and I tell you, you must try it out. As for now, please check out my other videos. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.